Hello everyone, welcome to Listen and Sleep, a channel that shares good and meaningful books that you should listen to before falling asleep. After finishing chapter 1 of the book The Giza Protocol, an Eden Black thriller, with a tense atmosphere and full of mysteries, combining archaeology, history and threats of unknown origin, let's start with the dramatic chapter 2.
The Himalayas, Nepal. Present day, I'm going to get you, Eden Black shouted at the top of her lungs. And when I do, you'll be sorry, Eden charged between two of the huts which made up the village of Sriva, searching for her quarry. Somewhere up ahead, footsteps pounded the wet earth. Eden swung around a corner and jumped over two chickens pecking at a pile of spilled grain. She took a deep breath. Even after 2 weeks in the village, the thin air at this altitude made intense exercise hard work. You can run, but you can't hide, Eden snarled. She listened carefully to the sound of the mountain slopes. Was that a whispered voice drifting from somewhere nearby? It was easy to lose a sense of direction between the tightly packed huts. Eden spun around, momentarily disorientated. Sweat prickled her forehead. Her muscles ached already after a day's work. Around the corner, the footsteps broke their cover. Eden sprinted after them, her feet slipping across the ground. Eden ran out into the village's central clearing. Raised voices cried in cheers. Hands clapped. Eden saw the group of children up ahead. They whooped and laughed in excitement. Eden upped her pace. Now on the open ground, she could catch them easily. Gotcha, she shouted, tapping Binsa, the youngest, on the arm. You too. She shouted again, reaching out and clipping Donu on the wrist. The two children huffed their disappointment and reluctantly crossed to the circle of adults sitting beside the fire. Eden focused all her attention on the one remaining child. Ida was 11 years old and quickly becoming a young woman. Eden had wondered how long she would want to play games with the other children. Maybe it was a blessing that life in the village prolonged childhood. Ida stood at the other side of the clearing and stared back at Eden. Do you want to surrender now? Eden said. I'll make it easy for you. Ida's gaze narrowed. Eden had no doubt the young woman understood. In the last 2 weeks, her English had improved exponentially. No way, Ida said, you try to catch me. Eden grinned, looking at the village's outer limit which lay 20 feet behind Ida. The young woman had nowhere to run. As you wish, Eden said, taking a dramatic step forward. Ida retreated slowly, glancing around. Eden took another 2 steps forwards. Ida mirrored her movements. The young woman was just a few feet from the boundary now. Eden feigned a leap forward from her crouched position. Ida fell for the ploy and hopped to the right. Eden doubled back and launched herself to the left. Flying, she extended both arms and reached out towards the younger woman. The younger woman's lithe body shot past. Eden reached further, her muscles stinging. Finally, her fingers closed around Ida's upper arm. Both women collapsed to the earth. The impact forced air from Eden's lungs. A cloud of dust rose around them. Eden rolled onto her back and inhaled deeply. A whoop of applause rose from the assembled villagers. Game over, Eden said, sitting up and brushing dust from her hands. Ida sat up too. She looked around in something of a daze. How did you? People always jump right, Eden said, struggling to her feet. Don't worry about it. She held out a hand and helped Ida up. Tomorrow I'm the catcher, Ida said. She grinned and sauntered towards the hut her family shared on the far side of the village. Eden watched her go and then looked out at the surrounding mountains. Her breathing and heartbeat reluctantly returned to their normal rate. She listened to the sounds of the mountain village. The caw of the jungle birds, which echoed riotously during the daylight hours on these lower slopes, muted with the dying light, and the sounds of insects zinged from the surrounding trees. She glanced up at the clear sky, from here just a dome of unbroken blue, and thought for the first time in several hours about her life back in England. She traced the trail of an airliner as it streaked through the heavens several miles above. At some point, Eden would have to return to England. There was much to do. Several weeks ago, although it seemed like mere moments, Eden had been instrumental in uncovering a set of ancient tablets. Not a reader of cuneiform, Eden couldn't help with the translation, but she suspected what they revealed would force her back into action. The world was changing, she thought, returning her gaze to the collection of huts which had become her temporary home, and she wanted to make sure it was going in the right direction. "Good night, Miss Black." A pair of squealed voices snapped Eden from her daydream. She waved at Binsa and Donu as they followed their parents back home. "Good night," Eden replied. Eden looked around at the dozen huts, constructed from mud and reeds, clinging precariously to the lower, Himalayan slopes, which made up the village of Sriva. She had been here nearly 2 weeks, but already, away from the modern world, it was feeling strangely like home. A stiff breeze sung through the countless lines of prayer flags, pulling them tight against their fixings. Part of a small charity group, Eden had come to the village to help teach the residents English. Another member of the party was helping them learn basic first aid. The volunteers spent their days wrapped up in the lives of the villagers. With livestock to care for and crops to sustain, there were no free passes. Eden's muscles ached, her hands were calloused, but she tingled with vitality. "Are you coming for food?" Startled, Eden spun around. Judah, one of the village's older men, greeted her with his trademark charming smile. His skin, creased by countless years in the village's thin air, glowed in the dying pinks of dusk. I will," Eden said. Her stomach growled as, though in response to the thought of food. The man stood beside Eden and looked out at the landscape. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "You know, I seen these mountains every day of my life." "Still just as beautiful," Eden nodded. A golden line appeared across the ridge of the opposite snow-capped peak. "You know, Nepal is really the biggest country in the world." Judah turned to Eden, with a glint in his eye. "It's certainly one of the most beautiful," Eden replied diplomatically. "No, is the biggest. If you could lay all these mountains, how you say?" He made a horizontal gesture with his hands, flat. Eden offered, "Yes. If you could lay these mountains flat, Nepal would be the..." His voice trailed off as an unfamiliar noise pierced the breeze. Judah stiffened, standing up straight. The muscles in his arms tensed. He turned in the direction of the track, which was the village's only connection to the outside world. Judah muttered some words Eden didn't understand. His voice rumbled like an ominous prayer. A stronger wind whipped through the village now, cracking the lines of prayer flags anew. The intrusive noise rose from a whisper to a growl. Eden leaned forward, listening in. The noise came again. She recognized it as the distant rise and fall of an engine. It took Eden several moments to realize why that was unusual. No one in the village owned a car and supplies were brought in once a week. Due to the unreliability of these deliveries, the villagers kept stores in preparation for much longer periods of isolation. Once a landslide had cut off the village for several months, but their weekly delivery had arrived 2 days ago, so certainly a new delivery wasn't due anytime soon. Judah offered his whispered prayer again. The engine rose from a whisper to a growl. Judah stood rigid, unmoving. "What is it?" Eden asked. "Who's coming?" Judah cleared his throat and pointed a bony finger towards the approaching vehicle. When he spoke, his words came out as little more than a murmur. "These men. They come to take our children. The girls. They take the girls." "What do you mean?" The man's words made little sense. Eden turned and looked into his wind-beaten face. "They take the girls." Eden caught Judah's hard gaze. Realization slammed Eden in the stomach. She'd read about this some months ago. Gangs of men who came up to the mountains to take the village's young women. Often by force, the men trafficked the young women to cities in Nepal or India where they were forced to work in an effort to pay off their debt. It was an awful operation. Eden couldn't believe monsters like this still existed in the modern world. The vehicle growled closer, tires slipping across the gravel track. The beat of Eden's heart rose with the force and regularity of a jackhammer. A sharp pain surged through her veins. She looked at the man, who had now turned a ghostly white in the dying sunlight. Eden's voice took on the deep tone of a confession. "That's not happening," she said, her eyes hard. "No one leaves this village tonight." The vehicle was just 500 feet away on the curving road now. Their progress was slow, but within a couple of minutes, they would arrive in the village. "We're going to need weapons." Eden's voice was as sharp as a knife. Judah caught Eden's gaze. Tension rippled across his facial muscles. "Follow me," Judah set off an all-out sprint. For a few strides, Eden had trouble keeping up. Ahead, several villagers gathered in the central clearing, including the other 3 volunteers. Judah reached the clearing first and barked at the villagers in their native tongue. The half-dozen men and women paled when the meaning of the words sunk in. Judah ducked into a hut and emerged clutching a machete and a long tool which looked a little like a scythe. The other volunteers looked from Eden to the man, confusion and fear etched on their faces. Eden quickly explained what was happening. "I don't want to put you in danger," Eden said, accepting the machete from Judah and rubbing her thumb carefully across the blade. It was sharp. "It's time these people fought back. I'm going to make sure that happens. If you don't want to be involved, take a walk up the hill." The roaring engine was audible from the center of the village now. Eden spun and looked towards the noise. Judah stood beside her, the scythe held in both hands across his chest. Eden glanced up at the man. Standing tall and proud in defense of his village, a force to be reckoned with. "We should be out of sight when they arrive," came a voice from behind them. Eden spun around. One of the volunteers remained standing, while the other 2 rushed towards the safety of the nearby trees. Eden locked eyes with the young woman. Working long days in the village, Eden had got to know Alyssa Stockwell quite well, but this bravery surprised her. Alyssa's dark eyes glinted in the dying sunlight. "What have we got here?" Alyssa strode forward and took the machete from Eden. She hefted it to test the weight. "That could do some damage. You stay here," Eden barked to Judah. "We'll stay out of sight until they're in the open." Judah nodded, his eyes narrowed in focus. The growling engine filled the air now. Beyond the first structures of the village, strong headlights swept through the forest. Eden and Alyssa rushed behind one of the huts moments before the vehicle crested the hill. The grumbling engine moved through the gears as the lane leveled off. Gravel snapped and skittered beneath the thick tires. The gearbox clunked as the vehicle slowed. Brakes squealed. The powerful engine dropped into its lowest register. Eden and Alyssa peered out from behind the hut. Judah stood motionless in the twin beams of the headlights. He held the scythe across his chest like an ancient warrior ready to protect. Ready to kill if necessary. Brakes squealed again, and the vehicle crunched to a stop.